All right. Hello, everybody. This is the Mind Body Marathon podcast, hosted by Dr. Leo here, yours truly. And on today's show, we have Jeremy Pope and Zach Goulet. I myself am a sports chiropractor. I run the clinic, Ohio Sports Chiropractic and Rehab. And, I sort of function as a lot of different things. I sort of function as a coach. I function as a sports physiologist and obviously a sports chiropractor. And, it's our hope in this show to get everybody to basically operate at a higher level and help their lifestyle and just improve their mind and body, but also with a little bit of hint of running as well. And like I said, to my left is Jeremy Pope. Jeremy, tell me a little bit about yourself.
I'm a father first. I have two girls. I'm married to my wife, Holly, for 12 years.
Nice. Good job on that.
Seriously.
Yeah, I've been ultra running for probably 8 to 10 years now. So very experienced and
yeah, cool. And then to my right is
I'm Zach Goulet, massage therapist here. ZG Sports Massage Therapy. Been massaging for 4 or 5 years, going on after 5 years. And
cool.
Yeah.
So this episode is about coaching. And basically the idea here is we're going to talk a little bit about like current coaching paradigms, coaching ideas. We're going to talk about our previous coaching experiences, both personally and professionally, like us as coaches, but also what we experienced from coaching perspectives. So there's a lot of different topics we'll hit here, and we have Jeremy on the show here, and he's sort of our marathon and more expert. He's a seasoned and veteran ultra marathoner and very accomplished, and so we're happy to have him on the show. And then Zach worked at the clinic doing some coaching as well, all the way from doing track races up to the marathon and helping a lot of athletes with that. I myself personally have coached people, not from a standpoint of like a professional group, or from a standpoint of just helping out a lot of people with their training plans. And my first profession was with exercise physiology, where I did an internship at the Olympic Training Center. I'm working with Mike Shannon there and doing a lot of physiology stuff there. So my initial exposure into the world of running was actually through physiology and through coaching. And so it's definitely been sort of a hidden passion of mine. And I've had the luxury of being a little bit of a fly on the wall with regards to a lot of the different coaching changes over the years. And so from my perspective, it's been fun for me to sort of analyze these things, but obviously I'm on the sports injury and sports management side of it. So which kind of allows me to sort of blend the two. But basically, what I wanted to chat about a little bit here is a lot of our coaching experiences. And Jeremy, just curious, let's just get started with you. Like how did you get into running initially?
Boy, I guess I just had a small weight loss journey. I was kind of the fat kid and
small.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
What did you lose?
I think I lost, maybe 50 to 60 pounds.
Nice.
Maybe not small, but so yeah, through that weight loss journey, I started to feel more healthy and just found running. And
so did you use running as the weight loss?
Initially I did not. I think it sparked something in there.
What age were you when you started that process?
Mid-20s. So I was somewhere around 25, 26, just getting through college at that point. And no, I'm not a doctor. So, yeah, I started with short distance stuff, 5Ks. And, from there, I was just like, I want to see what's further. Half marathon, and I want to see what's further. And I just kept stepping it up.
Yeah. So anybody that doesn't know Jeremy Pope, he really took that to the extreme because further is further quite a bit. So he, like I said, he is a seasoned ultra marathoner. Technically, the word ultra marathon means anything over a marathon, but it can get bananas. It can be like 27 miles to infinity, and some people take it crazy. Mm-hmm. So he's very accomplished and 50 miler, 100 miler, and so he is taking on now. So he's kind of getting a little bit more experience with coaching with that, because he's obviously been a little bit through the ringer with those and had multiple different coaches and kind of knows what to do on that next level. So we'll kind of discuss that a little bit more. But yeah, Zach, like, tell me about your experience of just initially getting in running and then kind of walking through your experience through coaching in college and stuff.
Yeah. So I got into running in middle school. So I was like traditional sport guy. Like I did football, basketball, baseball. And then I think most people that get into like track and field, they realize that they can't hit a baseball. Like my hand-eye coordination was absolutely terrible. Like I was the kid that like struck out all the time. And then like it'd be like the last game of the season, I'd like hit a triple and I'd be like, why didn't I do it all season long? Like what is going on? But
well, you're on the team because you could get to first base the quickest.
That my dad was coach.
Oh, wow, there we go.
So
a little inside gig.
But yeah, I always had like a passion for track and field and like watching it like during the Olympics. Like I always loved it. And then my dad did track when he was in high school. And so he got me into it. He showed me how to like long jump and you know, high jump. That was his specialty. And then yeah, I just found myself kind of gravitating more towards the running side of it. I loved running. And then yeah, come high school, was running track, still playing football. I quit after my sophomore year and then went full-time running, cross country and track, excelled. And then yeah, I got to Akron. So
tell us about your coaches at Akron.
Oh man, coaches or
coach,
coach. Because coaches, we had a lot of good characters. So my coach at Akron, it was Coach Lebetti. Love that guy. Even though he could drive you absolutely up the wall and he was crazy. Honestly, he psychologically got me to a point where like running for me is just, I think about it differently because he got me so psychologically ready. Now, on the other side of it, I had an up and down career. Like my career was, like I've said before, like a lot of high highs, a lot of low lows, but he always knew how to psychologically get me prepared. And so no matter where I was at in my training, whether I was coming back from injury or like not right where I need to be, I was always able to get on the line. And at least he would always say like, get to the halfway point on time. Mm-hmm. And I would always try to do that. With him, he coached, if some of you guys know, some of the older guys, he coached Robert Gary and Mark Krogan, both steeplers, and then
Olympians.
Olympians. And then his, I think his most famous one is he's the coach for Clayton Murphy and coached him to an Olympic bronze medal in 2016. So quite a pedigree for a coach. And I think you bring up a great point. Earlier, you kind of like drove past the point, but with regards to Lebetti, it's like one of the great things about a good coach that gets somebody to the next level is the mental aspect. Yeah.
And there's something called the 3/4 rule, right? Where in psychology, they studied this initially with astronauts, where when people were doing missions that were very difficult, like if they were doing simulation missions, most people would tap out at 3/4, right around 50% to 75% done. So Jeremy, if you think about ultras, most of the dropout rates happen in the 60s and 70s, which is the same thing. See, the issue with the 3/4 rule, because Zach, you mentioned, get through halfway on time.
Yeah.
Psychologically, just getting through halfway, digging into that penultimate quarter, 50 to 75% is the roughest portion of most races. Because once you get to that final quarter, we sort of know we're over the hump. We just have a little bit left, and you can psychologically dig in and just get it done. But that 50 to 75% segment, you're far enough away from the finish, and it hurts, and it's just uncomfortable, and there's 1,000 reasons why you should quit. But it's fighting through that really matters.
Dude, Lebetti for workouts, like we would do like anywhere from 12 to 16 by 400 with, I can't remember. It's been so long ago, but it was like shorter rest, and then we would oscillate between like faster reps and slower reps. And sometimes it would be continuous. And I would always remember, he'd always go like, when we get to that next step, you go, all right, got a smile on your face. Can I see those smiles on your face? Yeah. And now when I'm running ultras, like I was just talking to Jeremy before we started, and it was like, I was talking about my last ultra I did. And like, I started cramping really bad. And like, I had to like really just kind of figure it out. But then when I got to like the halfway point, I was like, you know what? I'm out here like on this trail right now, smile on my face, things suck, but it's okay. Like we're here. We just got to keep on fighting through.
And I feel like at times it's in an ultra, there are things that are it hurts so bad. It actually is funny. And like, I truly tell myself that I'm like, just laugh. I don't really know what else to do.
You're 100% true on that.
Like, let's just laugh this off for a second. And I think it brings yourself up to this next level.
Yeah, well, there's a weird thing with like running economy and smiling,
Yeah.
where I want to say, now we can kind of reveal this once we release the episode. We can sort of like confirm this, but I'm pretty sure smiling will improve your running economy by like 3 to 4%. Like, so what that means is you are
Yeah.
3 to 4% more efficient when you're smiling.
I
So
get it.
that
I
is
like it.
actually equivalent to doing plyometrics for a full season.
If you smile when you
If
run.
you smile when you race,
Well, I know what I'm doing for that.
which is crazy. So you want to have a relaxed face, but like a slight smile, like welcoming the discomfort,
Yeah.
welcoming what's coming. Like,
Kipchoge effect.
honestly,
Yeah, that's a good
That's why
point.
he's up there.
Yeah.
He's right there. Yeah. So I don't know. It's an interesting thought, but like that, so now that we're kind of discussing the idea of like coaching and people out there that are looking to kind of improve their running, whether it be like a couch to 5K, or they want to look to run professionally, or they want to look to just PR in any event, it's really important for people to understand the mentality of the connection, the mental connection of you and the coach. And I think this is often missed because a lot of people will hire coaches based on the technical side of it, based on the
Mhm.
number side of it and the data. And like, oh yeah, they know what they're talking about. They know this workout and that workout, but it's like, do they inspire you? I mean, do they make you want to run through a brick wall?
Right,
Like that's
right.
what gets athletes to the next level. Like workouts are like, there's no magic workout out there. Despite this double threshold world and despite this whole world that we have going on right now, there's literally no magic workout. I mean, guys were running faster in the 60s or in the 70s and 80s in the marathon than most American male marathoners right now. And it's like, as of right now, like what inspired those guys in the 60s or in the 70s and 80s, they were not doing double threshold workouts. They were
Right.
doing workouts that inspired them. They believed. And I feel like the connection to the coach in that way is important. Did you have that connection with LeBady?
In terms of what, like
did he inspire you?
Oh,
Did he get you to run
100%.
through a
Oh
brick wall?
gosh. Oh, 100%. Yeah, like I said, like he was by far for me the best psychological coach that I had. Like he would say stuff in a way, and the thing that was like great about him is that he could pick and choose how he would talk to people. So with me, he could be a little bit more blunt. So like there was one time that he was like, I just think you're running like a chicken shit. And like I'll never forget it. It was cross country and it was at Buffalo. It was one of the first meets of the season. And I was up there with the lead pack and we came up to this like little hill and I was like, I need to conserve my energy. And so I let them go and I couldn't pick back up. And at team meeting on Monday, he's like, Zach, he's like, at that point, you were a chicken shit. He's like, you let them go. You gave up at that point. And at MAC, it was at Buffalo again. I got to that point. I was like, I'm not going to be that.
Yeah.
And I stayed right where I had to be. And, at that point in our with our team, we finished the highest that we've ever finished.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was pretty sweet.
I know I had a similar experience where I was in college and, I was really injured my first 2 years. And I, at one point my sophomore year, I'm like moping around about my knee. And then Hazen, my college coach, comes up to me and he literally goes, do you know what some people would call you right now? And I was like, what? And he goes, a candy ass. And he goes, just some people would say those things about you.
And this was at Malone.
He never said that. And he goes, he was so smart. He was like, I'm not going to say that to you, but just so you know. And I was really hurt. And there was a thing there, but I did really I needed that,
Yeah.
and like males respond to that.
Yeah.
Maybe that's not a great, technique for everybody, but it's just like it's important to connect with a coach and have a coach be able to
Mhm.
inspire you. Jeremy, you had any experiences great with coaches, or are you just sort of like, no, actually I've just been doing my own thing?
Maybe a little bit doing my own thing, but yeah, I had a coach for basically the whole 2022 year. Yeah, and I feel like he was a professional athlete. Tyler Green, sponsored by Nike. So I feel like that maybe held power itself. Just,
Yeah.
Like a Nike
knowing
sponsored
he's
athlete.
been through the gamut sort of thing.
Mhm.
He's been through it. But it was a long distance internet connection. So I didn't have this thing like I'm going to run through a wall for this guy
Well,
kind of thing.
But I think in your case, though, what is really interesting, and like this is something that I'm starting to kind of get into now that I'm in the world of ultra running, is that you are brushing shoulders with some really talented runners, and the community talks.
For sure.
And every time that I've like talking to you, I always come out of it with better advice, like just stuff to kind of keep in mind when I've like talked to Arlen, I've come out of it like getting some good advice. And like, I know that you run with some guys. I mean, I know you do.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Walmsley might be one of them. Sometimes
some-
when he's in Ohio,
Definitely some big names.
Yeah.
But I think to your point, like the community connection, the personal connection, that matters a lot.
I think
Right?
so. I think also to like Zach's point and yours, there's a coach that's not talking the same to two different athletes,
Yes.
right? It's
Yeah.
you talk different to different athletes and kind of meet them where they're at.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think that's a great segue into my little bit of a coaching experience with me personally, not me coaching, but being coached. But I think when I graduated from Malone, I was coached by a guy named Matt Woods, who will end up on the podcast for sure, which I think would be absolutely fascinating. And Woods is a special person, very special person. We love the guy. He's an absolute genius, and I don't use that word lightly. He can talk circles around anybody with physiology, but he has a sort of social presence that's a little different. And I connected really well with him. And because when I know Matt said certain things, it meant that I had to do it. And it was just like very like matter of fact. And when he sort of got very technical and very wishy-washy with sort of things, and then I knew he was a little bit undecided with that workout. But if sometimes he would come in and he would say certain things, then I knew I had to complete that task, and I would do everything possible to sort of do that thing. And yeah, he taught me a lot about the physiology side of it, but also when it's time to go, you go, right? When it's time to make it matter, you put all your efforts into it, and every cell in your body is dedicated towards that thing. I feel like that's lost a lot right now. Like I'm talking to a lot of these college kids and some of these professional athletes that I treat, and there's this obsession with the right workout, the volume, the Strava-ish of the world.
I was going to ask that question. Do you think that's what it is?
I think it is. I feel like,
And social media too.
When you go Rocky and Siberia, man, Strava didn't exist. You just go off the grid and you hunker down and you work on your weaknesses. That's what Rocky did. Huh?
He knew he did it. You knew you did it.
Yeah. And that's all that needed to matter, right? Because when the race comes down to, when it comes down to the race and you're at that 3/4 point where you're literally asking the question, like, do I go or do I settle? Your body will remember those workouts. And if you never back down, if you were inspired and you took it to that next level, you won't back down in a race because it's conditioning, it's mental conditioning. And people want to have this special workout or this special workload. And it's not that. It's literally mental. John McDonald, the late John McDonald, the coach of Arkansas. So I got to meet him a couple times and chatted with him quite a bit, had some couple meals with him. I used to work at a running shoe store in Atlanta, West Stride, and his niece was the owner of the store. So that's how I got connected with John McDonald. He coached at Arkansas. So he coached for roughly 90-ish seasons at Arkansas, and he won 42 national championships. So he almost won literally every other season a national championship. This guy was bizarrely successful. He was an old Irish farmer, and was he the most trained on physiology? No, but he can make everybody run through a brick wall. An old Irish farmer, big hands, big presence, just really made you own your deficits and really made you go after things. I mean, that's what, right? So like, I feel like people just want this sort of special thing, and in the end, you need inspiration.
Right.
Inspiration is what makes, moms pick up cars off their kids and do crazy things, right? That's emotion, that's hunkering down. And I feel like that is missed in this world of like physiology, and this world of like, the specific workouts and volume and the Strava-ish of the pacing and everything is the passion side of it. We've lost the emotion.
Right.
And I really feel like I'm going to keep hunkering down on this podcast because I feel like we've gotten too technical and we've gotten too data because it's what's right in front of us, and what's not in front of us is that emotion and that deep feeling.
And I think like to go off that, because I think that's a really good point, is there's a lot of content out there now, whether that's through like a motivational documentary or like, again, like one of the professional athletes posting their workout, but that's a snippet of what is actually going on. And you want to always show your best self when you're doing that, whatever that is. Like, even if it's like, I was facing adversity and like, I just had to really grind it through. And then like, you know, I said this when I ran my ultra race, and I was like, I think some of those ultra marathon documentaries are a bunch of BS, because they show them like still running into the like aid station, but then they're like, I was puking and throwing up, and then they're like, hey, like hugging people and high five.
They don't show the puking.
Yeah, and like we don't have that like that onus of our own ability to go out there to execute. It has to be like a perfect situation, or it feels like it has to be a perfect situation. Well, it was like kind of windy outside, so just like I didn't do that. And you're like, but you had an opportunity in front of you.
Yeah.
What I would say in the ultra running world is, with the content that you're speaking of, it comes from those aid stations, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's not like on course content.
Yeah.
Right.
So you see people at aid stations, they look spry, they're flying through.
Mm-hmm.
The meat and potatoes is between those aid stations, and that's where the things get
What gets
real.
you through those meat and potatoes? What gets you through those aid stations? The periods between them.
The periods between them. I truly love being in those moments when it gets deep and dark. Like, I really, really love that. And I feel like I know that it's an ultra, so I know that it's going to come. And then when it's there, it's like, okay, now we're here. It's time to start.
But why do you like that segment?
I'm actually not sure.
Dude, every time.
But I keep going back, and I want to, is there something on the other side?
Yeah.
Can I get further? Can I do it a little bit faster maybe? Can I come out of it in a different way, whether it's like, you know, like it's a calorie deficit, or maybe I feel nauseous, you know, there's all these experiences, you know, it's the pain within the legs, but there's pain everywhere else. You know,
I love it.
I mean, that's the genius of, look, this podcast, obviously we're talking about running, right? But running is it is an activity. Obviously you put one leg in front of the other, but it's not about running. Running is about challenging yourself, and it's about basically that mechanism of it's basically a way for you to just sort of discover how you can push through some very difficult things. And it's never going to be it for any of us being accomplished runners, or even if you're not accomplished, like you're just getting started, it's hard for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And fighting through those battles and understanding the why, I think, is so critical. Like, we met David Goggins a couple months ago, and he kept hunkering down on know your why. And I think that's such an important thing. And that's why I ask you that. It's like, you got to know why you're going into battle for this kind of stuff. Like, why do you want to even try to get faster? Why do you want to have a coach? What's the point of it?
Right.
None of us are going to be like Kipchoge. None of us are going to be the fastest ever. Why do you want that?
Absolutely.
Once you answer that question, then you'll go to the well. But if you never answer that question, you'll never go to the well.
That's so true. And I was actually thinking about that when we were like when I was coaching. And I was thinking about that when Jeremy and I were kind of talking at the beginning, before we started. And I was thinking, like, I never actually asked my clients that I was working with, like, why do you want to do this? Because most of the time, and I did more of like general population, I didn't really have anybody that was like shooting for the moon or like trying to make a USA team or whatever it was, but like wanted to qualify for Boston or do this. But I never asked them why. And I think, like, yeah, you want to qualify for Boston, but like you also have all these other things in your life that are part of your life that need to be part of your life, because you can't give up work. You can't give up, you know, some social aspect of it, but there also has to be some sort of sacrifice. And I never asked them that. And like, I was thinking about that. I was like, I never asked them that why. Like, why are you here with me right now?
Well, that's often what I do in treatment. So I'll often, like, if somebody's like, oh, you know, like my shoulder sore or my back sore or whatever, I'm like, what do you want to do that you're not able to do right now? You know, like, why essentially, why are you here? What is this injury preventing you from doing? And they might not even know the answer, but they'll figure it out quickly. They'll be like, I really want to garden, or I really wanted to run this half marathon and now I can't. whatever the level is, it's eating away at them
Mhm.
because they understand that something that takes them away from being physically active eats away at your psyche. Because if you're not able to do what you physically want to do, then you feel lesser. I mean, they're just being honest. So that's the mind body connection.
Mhm.
So
Totally agree.
yeah, and I think finding the right coach that will inspire you and help you answer these broad questions is critical.
Yeah.
Everybody out there can sort of pick apart the technique side of it, but are they going to help you on this side of it, the mental side of it?
I think that's great. Would you say that maybe defining the internal motivation versus the external?
Yeah,
Because I feel
Yeah.
like a lot of times people are just
there's a clear external.
there's clear externals.
Yeah.
They're easy. Maybe they're
Yeah.
like,
I
Go
want
for
to
the medal.
qualify for Boston,
Yeah.
or I want to make it to Olympic trials, or I want to try to get to Western States or something. You know, they have this thing where they're trying to get to.
but the digging into the well is that internal.
That's a whole different conversation. That actually might not be a conversation you're even willing to have with, you know, people close to you. It might be too internal,
Yeah.
you know, and which is
Agree
fair
with that.
because, you know, I've had people that I've talked to and I can tell they're battling some stuff, and it's like they don't talk about it. Just keep it inside. You know, just let it be your drive, let it be what gets you to the next level, because I think that's important for everybody to have that.
Mhm. It is. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's a hard concept. And I think like having now been on the other side of it, even if it was just for a little bit, because I also did coach at Twinsburg too. I forgot to mention that I was assistant coach at Twinsburg for 2 seasons.
Yeah,
And
it's a local high school here
Yeah.
in Cleveland.
And that you know, that was an eye-opening experience to see how much like oversight you had on an athlete, even though it like is just running. Like you would think about it like, yeah, I'm going to sit on the top of my car while these kids go out and run 5 miles, but then they come back and they like ask you questions and they want to know, and or like if they don't want to, then you know it's for the social aspect, and like
Yeah.
you might not want to invest so much of your like or your energy into it, but you also got to know like don't overstep your boundaries. Like
Yeah.
that's not, you know, and I saw that a lot when I was in college. Like I you know, I saw a lot of coaches kind of like, I don't want to say overstep boundaries, but try to be the somewhat authority on like everything with
Yeah.
running.
So what do you mean by everything with running?
Like in terms of like rehab or like injury, like issues, whatever that might be. Like
Yeah.
I'm going to take initiative onto this, and it's a scary thing.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's very critical for when you're dealing with an athlete for things to be siloed.
Mm-hmm.
What I mean by that is it's very important for the coach to be the coach and for the trainer to be the trainer or the doctor to be the doctor. It's hard to be all of it.
Mm-hmm.
I know this personally because I'm obviously a doctor and a provider, and it's difficult to coach people who I'm treating because there's just a different dynamic there. That's why I like the idea of like being, you know, a running consultant, because even if I'm not directly invested from a coaching direct standpoint, I know when to call BS because I know enough physiology. And so from your perspective, you know, you're saying like, yeah, there's like definitely some coaches out there that want to a little bit overstep their boundaries and want to be physicians and want to diagnose and want to treat. And I think that is the worst idea ever.
Yeah.
Not even from the standpoint like that they don't know, but from the standpoint of like, why would you want that?
Right.
Like, let other people deal with that, because that is a whole nother thing that you just shouldn't even get involved with. Like, it's up to the doctors, it's up to the trainers to sort of figure that stuff out.
Yeah. And like you could inevitably prolong recovery.
You could definitely.
Or healing, whatever that might be. And
yeah, because if you don't actually know what's thoroughly going on, then you might just think like, oh, you know, this is something you can sort of manage and train through. And it's like, well, maybe not actually. Maybe there's some subtle like thing in there that a doctor would be able to pinpoint, you know, or a running specialist would be able to pinpoint and just sort of like execute in a different way. But
yeah. It like, I never had that growing, like in my time running. Like it was, especially in high school, like I loved my high school coach. Like I loved my college coach. I mean, I love both of them. They both like inspired me a bit. I mean, they both helped me, but my high school coach, he was just like, I knew what I knew in running and that was it. And I'm going to get you to the point where I'm hoping that I'm sending you off to college. And I really respect that. And
Yeah.
like Labady was the same way. Like Labady would actually advocate for you if you had something going on, and like he just didn't feel like, the trainers or whoever was taking an initiative that he thought was appropriate, he would come in and advocate for you. But he never like once was like, here, get on the ground. Like I'm gonna get that
Yeah.
program.
Jeremy, one of the interesting things about the reason why I wanted you to be on here is that obviously we're talking a lot about the mental side of it and that whole component. I feel like ultras are totally different. I feel like ultras are almost all mental.
I would say very close.
And so, it's like for somebody to be able to put themselves in a position to try to cover 100 miles or 50 miler or something like that, they got to be in a very special place mentally. And I think it's important for us to understand like that component. And so for you, what's some of the things that you feel like you want to add to the table from a mental component, like with helping to coach people doing ultras?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like you need some level of fitness, right? Like you're covering a distance that's beyond a marathon, right? Whether it is just a 50K, whether it is just 50 miles, just 100 miles. You have to have some level of fitness, right? Your body has to hold up to the distance. So, but with that comes all this mental component. I truly believe, I don't know, you have to put yourself out there to experience it,
Yeah.
You mean as a coach?
I was saying more from the athlete
Oh, yeah,
standpoint.
yeah.
You have to go and do it to feel it, because I don't know. I think Zach, like you could speak to this, right?
Oh, 100%.
Once there's so many hours involved, I like to, sometimes it's not even the distance, and even if people are trying to do something in the fastest that they've ever done, it's still hours. And those hours are stacking up, which, so yeah, you have to feel what that physically feels like, but then the mental is all there as well to then make yourself do it.
Okay, so say somebody is like trying to do their first 50 miler and you as a coach are saying, okay, it's time to really challenge yourself this weekend. We're a couple months out or a month out or so, whatever from the race, whatever periodization you're setting up. What do you tell them mentally about what they're about to experience on that weekend of a workout that you're going to challenge them? That'll be somewhat of a simulation for the 50 miler.
What I would say within that, you're just going to have to believe that you can do it first and foremost. You have to be able to take the tools that you have and then just go out there and be part of,
It sounds so simple, but yet that's
so
why we
hard.
were initially talking about the why.
I think I can use a good example for this. So like my first 50 that I did, I consulted with one of my buddies, Heath Harris. And Heath Harris is a teammate of mine from Akron and really close friend. And his dad is like Mr. Ultra. Like he's done everything, like everything. And the one thing that like Heath kind of told me for my first 50 was like, look, it's going to get hard. Like it's 100% going to get hard. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And you can't be afraid that when you're at that aid station, even if you have a plan in your head that you want to be in and out of that aid station within a minute and a half, sometimes taking 5 minutes, you'll gain that 5 minutes plus more back. But if like this is your first one, you don't need to be like trying to go out there and hit a record, but like you need to put yourself into a situation knowing that like if you're at your limit, that it's okay to like take a step back.
Yeah.
And that really, I mean, it helped me up to a point, but not really.
Well, I feel
everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Exactly.
Dude.
Exactly.
Mike Tyson.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you noticed that there.
I did.
Okay. Mike Tyson's on the wall, by the way. But no, I really feel like that's an important point because to your point, you got to go through it. And it may not there's a saying in war that the map is not the territory. When you look at a map, you're like, oh, okay, this city's here and there's a river here or whatever. The territory is different. The territory is where are the trees down, where are the undulations, where is it, boggy, like what is the footing like? That's the territory. And so when we say in our heads, we want to run this, we want to do this, we don't know what the territory is going to look like. That's the map. The map is this is our goal. We think we want to be at these levels. But when you're doing something novel, like pushing the envelope, whether it's speed or distance, whether you want to run your all-out 5K or you want to run 100 miles, you actually don't know what it's going to be like. I mean, could you ever really tell a mother what it's going to be like before she's about to have her first kid?
Not at all.
You could literally never tell her. It's crazy. Like you could think you tell her, but like it has to happen internally.
Yeah.
So that's why I love what you were saying. Like you just got to prep the athlete. Like whatever is about to come, you're going to be fine. It has been experienced by many of people. You're going to come out on the other end stronger. You just have to endure it, period.
Getting to the halfway point on time.
One is like maybe that the territory is the number, right? It's the 100-miler. It's the 50-miler. And then within that it's the hours.
Yeah.
You may have a goal, maybe that goal slips away.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
And it's okay. It's totally okay.
Or the weather, like
the weather.
At the 50, it was like a tsunami, tornado, crazy thing with the weather. And like, I know my plan went out the window the first half mile when we took off. And I was like, dude, this is going to be rough for me.
But even scaling this idea down. So we're obviously talking about a little bit of longer distance stuff, but even talking to like high school kids who want to run a fast 5K, they're obsessed with what other people are doing.
Yes.
And so they always want to compare themselves from like a standpoint, like in cross country. And it's like, look, cross country is literally mano a mano. You cannot compare a race in Southern Ohio to a race in Northern Ohio. You just can't. It's not the same thing. So if somebody runs like, whatever, 15:10 and you're worried and scared about this particular person, you can't do that because you literally did not race them. So you cannot psych yourself out prior to that engagement. And so, it's important to like just race and it's mano a mano and just get out there and compete.
And as a coach, how do you instill that again? Like where do you see that? Like
that's where I do not envy high school coaches.
Yeah.
But okay, so like a little bit of a side story. So I started at Malone, which is a Malone College. Now it's Malone University. So I started in 2001 and I graduated in 2006. So I was there from 2001 to 2006. Internet running logs became popular in 2003. So when we were recruiting people to come to our college to run from high school in 2001, 2002, everybody was pretty chill, like just kind of like, oh, whatever. Like 2003, they started coming in telling us about their volume and their mileage and all this stuff. And we're like, what? You guys are running that stuff in high school? Like we couldn't even believe it. It became an arms race. Now that you got to see what everybody else is doing, then it upped the ante. And that changed the perspective. And that was dangerous because you don't know if that's right for you. So if you see, Joe Schmo in the next town over is running, 60 miles a week, means I must run 60 miles a week to keep up with him. No, that's not what happened.
Right.
Literally every single year prior to 2003, that is not how society existed.
Right.
Literally we hadn't, Bill Rogers, who trained in Boston in the 70s, did not know what Steve Scott was doing in California.
Right.
On the other side of the continent. So it's like, it's important for us to like keep within ourselves, understand what's right for us, and just work within our framework and not compare ourselves. And so I think that's why I was joking about the Strava-ish world right now. It's great. I think it's awesome. It's a really cool component. It adds a lot of great features, but people live and die by that stuff. And that really is not okay. Because somebody who runs 20 miles a week or 30 miles a week is no less than somebody who runs 50 or 60. They might actually still be able to compete with that person. And it is not okay for you to psychologically take yourself out of the ball game without actually towing the line with that person.
I would agree. I would 100% agree. Yeah, it's a weird world we live in.
But I feel like that's the cool thing about cross country.
Yeah,
cross country, it's course specific. It's weather, mud,
and it's so hard to get that through to kids.
It is.
because they see somebody run fast on another course and they'd freak out that they're untouchable. And it's like, that is absolutely not true, because an alley fight is an alley fight, right? So when you get into a race, it's an alley fight and you do not know what's going to happen in that race. And so to psychologically take yourself out of that ball game prior to that race is discouraging at the least.
And maybe it is hard. I mean, it might be hard for a coach now. I mean, because there is so much content out there, and like as a coach, you are only with them for a couple hours a day, and then they can, athletes can go home and they can get on YouTube and they can get on Strava and like look at all this stuff and start to like get into their own heads.
Well, that's why I feel like we'll touch on these training topics quite a bit on this podcast, but here, that's why I wanted to just start this show with like, coaching is important. It's vitally important, but it's important from the standpoint of like getting your mind right and having somebody anchor you, right? It's just like talking to a good friend, right? You sometimes like you get stuff in your head and you're just kind of like running a little bit ragged there. And then all of a sudden you talk to your good buddy and they're like, dude, are you missing this key point? Like that's a coach, right? Somebody that just like grounds you. We lean too much into the technical side of the coaching, and there is that. Trust me, I can talk mental pretzels around any one of them, and I can understand the highest end physiology of all of it, whether it's double threshold or whatever. But I think the mental aspect is really critical,
especially when you're young.
Yeah,
especially when you're young.
I think it is. Yeah, and sometimes I feel like when we oftentimes here at the clinic, when we get really good high school kids and then they go to college and then they kind of fall flat, they lost the inspiration.
Yeah.
The college coach was just very technical and very, standoffish, and they didn't want to run through a brick wall anymore. But then the high school coach was just inspiring them and maybe leaned a little bit less on the technical side of it, but they ran faster. So that happens more times than not.
Well, I mean, you need to be able to have a conversation, right? You can put X's and O's out there all day, but you have to have conversations, and we all have lives, right? Outside of high school and college, once it's real life now, there's everything surrounding you. There's work, there's kids, there's everything.
Yeah. Well, okay. So you bring up the point of conversation. This is my biggest beef right now with the coaching. And I feel like almost on a daily basis, I am struggling to like understand coaches' perspectives on the current training paradigm right now in the idea of conversation. So basically, it's important to understand what your athletes are feeling. Okay. This comes down to aches and pains. This comes down to perceived exertion, which is critical and very underrated. And so in the world of double threshold, which is actually a kind of a popular idea that's kind of come out of Norway, where Jakob Ingebrigtsen is running extremely well. And it's come out that the Norwegians have this unique training style. And I feel like it's all the rage right now in the US. But I feel like it's literally totally lost in the ether. People do not understand what they were originally doing. Zach, do you want to allude a little bit real quick, and then let's just kind of have a little quick conversation about that?
Yeah, I feel like with the double thresholds, it is getting lost in the ether that that's all we need to be doing. Like that's the only way to be successful. And what I found just through my research and like my understanding of it, especially through like the triathletes of Norway, like Gustav Eden and Christian Blumenfeld, I think. I'm sorry if I put your name, but it is a long time. It's a long process.
Yeah,
it's years and years in the making to get to that point.
This is so critical.
And that was like my first it's like Kenyans when they walk barefoot or they run when you find out that they run to school and back and they have like double the mileage on their feet. It's like, yeah, they've been doing this since 13.
So a couple key points. One, Joe Viho used to always say that by the age of 18, we are 10,000 miles behind the average Kenyan in terms of running.
That's a lot.
That's massive.
Okay. So just let that sink in. So it was less about what the Kenyans were doing and more about just work. Just literally put one foot in front of the other. That's literally all they're doing. There's a lot of other components there too that we can get into in a later episode. But on this episode, now here comes the Norwegians. They come up with this great idea of that if you run at threshold, which is basically like anaerobic threshold or tempo pace. This is a lot of key terms that are being thrown out there. All it really means is this is a point at which your body can clear lactic acid efficiently. And it's the maximum point that your body can clear lactic acid. What is lactic acid?
Muscle buildup.
Yeah, it's basically just like acids building up in the muscle that makes pain, right? And so double threshold essentially is where, or threshold training essentially is where you are producing a decent amount of lactate, but yet you can still clear it at a high rate.
Right.
And it's not spilling over. So think of like you're boiling water and water is coming up to the point, it's boiling, but it's not spilling over the pan. That's threshold training. The Norwegians figured out, wow, we can actually compete with the Africans if we go out there and we we threshold at a high rate. Because if you work beyond the threshold, which is the next realm beyond the threshold is max VO2 training. Once you work beyond the threshold, it takes a while for your body to recovery. And so if you never go beyond that, you actually need less recovery. So hence the term double threshold. In a day, they'll literally go out and do a threshold run in the morning and a different type of threshold run in the afternoon. Okay, this is the magic. For years, they measured lactate readings with perceived exertion.
Right.
This is so vital for everybody to understand. And I feel like I'm speaking to a very select few here, but this select few is governing a ridiculous amount of athletes. High school, college, insane number of my patients right now. People are not understanding that the Norwegians honed in on lactate readings at a threshold mark with perceived exertion. Meaning, if I run a threshold, I stop, you prick my finger, you measure my lactate, we determine I'm below threshold. Perfect. I keep going at that same pace. I do that for years. Mm-hmm. Next thing you know, that athlete understands that when they're at that certain prick of lactate, I feel this way. Now, years later, I can go, I feel this way. I know I'm below lactate.
And correct me if I'm wrong.
That's how it happened. It's not like you throw it out there and you just say it's conversation pace or it's, I mean, it's like literally, that's not how it works. Like I'm blown away at what I hear from people.
And correct me if I'm wrong on this, because I could be wrong on this, but isn't that threshold different for different events or training events?
This is a great point. Okay. So if somebody's training to run a marathon, they need to capture the threshold conversation slightly different than if they're running the mile. Okay. Because a miler or somebody who's akin to running a fast mile has what's called lactate clearance. They can handle lactate tolerance really well. A marathoner cannot. And so it's important for that person to sway their lactate in one way versus the other. So you can't just willy-nilly throw it out there and just say that every marathoner or every miler should be doing these types of workouts. It takes nuance. That's why I like being the idea of like a running consultant, because I don't think people are getting this 10,000 foot view of what's happening here. And I'm looking at it and I'm hearing from these athletes and I'm seeing what these coaches are doing and it's blowing me away. It's literally error after error.
Yeah.
So would you say that people are more injured?
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
Because what's happening is what the genius behind what the Norwegians were able to do, and it's genius. No question, it's genius. Yeah. It's a hack on how we can compete with the East Africans. No question. We being Western, right? Is the genius behind it is that they realize that if you are in the realm of threshold and below, you can work at a higher rate, which means you can run more mileage. Mm-hmm. So now all of a sudden you can take an athlete where if they're doing traditional Western workouts, they might actually get injured if they ran over whatever, let's just say 70 miles a week. But if you're doing double thresholds, they might actually be able to push 80. Now, that's if you're doing it the right way. If you're genuinely following lactate readings and you're genuinely following perceived exertions, and you're being very genuine with that, then you can push the envelope with volume. But it's not what's happening. So coaches are just willy-nilly ramping up volume and ramping up lactate work and ramping up volume or intensity. And it's like when you're like, working with like a recorder or a preamp, you can't increase bass and treble at the same time. Like you just can't. Like, and if you do that, you have to be very sure and very certain that you are riding the line properly.
And I'm pretty sure I watched a video about them talking about their progression to doing this. And it was like like in Norway, you go to like a training center and you're like, I'm going to like put everything into like my athletics. And they said, or especially the triathletes, that we had to weed out the people that couldn't handle it. It wasn't for everybody.
That's so true. Yeah. So this is the N of one, right? Nobody would ever go like, no high school coach in basketball would be like, LeBron James did this workout on Tuesday. We need to reproduce this workout. Like nobody would ever do that because nobody could do what LeBron James is doing. Right. So why in the world would we have a local high school kid doing what Jakob Ingebrigtsen is doing at the highest level?
Right.
It makes no sense. You're missing so many levels of development. First and foremost, those kids probably don't even have the right socks on the feet. They don't even know what's up or down at that point.
Coles, those
Hanes socks are like turned over. Like they don't. We just have to be honest here. There's a progression to things, and so a professional athlete and what they understand internally and what they feel internally is not what the average high school athlete understand and feel. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like this is just absolutely lost in this understanding. So, and I feel like it's even more with ultras, right? So athletes really need to understand themselves at a very high rate to get into ultras.
Yeah. I mean, essentially at that point, it's people are saying, "I'll just run more miles to run further."
Right.
That's not the case.
Right.
Not everybody's going to be running 150 miles a week.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. Right. Time and everybody's injured.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I'm currently trying to work on is finding your basement, right? So everybody needs to find sort of their lowest level that they can train to get a decent benefit. Mm-hmm. And then, because I feel like for decades, people have been trying to find their ceiling. They train and they train until it's too late. And their ceiling is their injuries, fatigue, not able to complete their goals. But I think it's important for everybody to figure out their basement. And their basement relies on, do you have kids? Do you have a business? Do you, are you, in debt? Are you stressed? Do you have a great marriage? Do you have a great relationship? Do you feel fulfilled? Do you feel like you're in the right, all of these things matter, because if you're saying, like yes to all of those, then you're probably going to run less miles.
It's going to be hard.
It's going to be hard. But if you're 23 years old and you're, making a decent living and you got a nice professional job, you have no kids, and you feel like you have like all afternoon to train, oh boy, you're going to be able to crank. You're going to be able to crank. Life's good. But if you have all of these other things, you have to take that into perspective. You cannot compare yourself to everybody. You have to take all of these things into perspective.
And having a coach to be able to help you with that mentality and understanding where you're at, I think is vitally important.
Yeah.
You can push harder. You can push more if you have somebody who can direct you, not in the way of physiology per se, especially if it's more novice, but in the direction of like, hey, like you work 8 hours a day and you're on your feet. Like, you don't need to be putting in 70 miles a week, but you can put in 40 miles a week.
Well, that's why I think it's important for athletes to interview their coaches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to just say like, not just like, oh, wow, you're so fast, or you're so successful. You've coached so many people. No, like, talk to me about you. Mm-hmm. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? Like, what modifications would you make based on the fact that, I have a kid that's this, I have a job that's this, I have a life that's this.
You're seeing that more too with the older population. I do have a lot of clients that they'll come in like, I fired my coach. And I'm like, what?
Good.
Yeah. And they're like, it's just not working out for me. They're like asking way too much. I don't have the time to do it. And then they'll interview their next coach and they're like creating that process of what you're saying.
Yeah, I can't implore you. That's important.
It's huge.
You have to make sure, because there are a lot of charlatans out there. There's a lot of people out there that are just trying to make a little bit of running physiology is fairly easy. I can coach people. Nah, come on.
For the two of you, did you, as a high school athlete transitioning to college, did you pick your college based on the coach?
Yeah, actually I did. When I was in high school, my high school coach, my last 2 years, she ran for my alma mater, Malone University, and she said, if you want to run at your true potential, you must go to this university. So when I talked to that college coach, I was like, initially it was like kind of unimpressed with Hazen, but then he said something at the very end of my initial meeting with him when I was in high school and I went on a college tour. He said, he's like, I just want you to know that your potential is not going to be here in college. Actually, your running potential will happen from 22 and beyond. And he's like, it's our goal to get you to that point. It's our goal to get you set up so that you can keep challenging yourself beyond college. And then he casually mentioned that at the end of the session. And I was like, I walked away from that and I was like, that is incredible. So then when I'm at Malone and I'm running for them in my sophomore year, junior year, I'm thinking that in the back of my head. I'm like, okay, I'm literally going to be much better after this college experience. And so I kept I was injured a lot my first couple of years, and that kept me in the game. That little, 1 minute saying that he had kept me in the game for years. And thank God he did, because I realized an exorbitant amount of potential that I never would have realized had he not said that.
Yeah, mine was a little bit different than that. I would say yes and no for me. No, in the fact that I picked Akron because they were on the cheaper end. I wasn't a very good student academically. And the schools that I was looking at, one being Malone and one being Ashland, they offered me a scholarship, but it just wasn't enough for me to be comfortable going there financially. But the one thing that LeBady did say, so back when I was in high school, they had a thing called Tuesday night track or open track night. And Coach LeBady wanted me to come and do a workout. And I was talking to him back and forth. I filled out the recruiting questionnaire and I did 6x300. I don't even know what the rest was or what the pace was. But at the end of it, he goes, I want you here next year. I can't offer you any money, but you're going to be a preferred walk-on. And I was like, you got it. And I think the difference was when I got to college, it wasn't about long-term running, but it was about success, capturing success right now. I want you to be competitive in the MAC. I want you to make it to the first round in the NCAA. I want you to make an NCAA final, and I want to get you to run at USAs. And you're like, what? You think I can do that? Yep, I think you can. And then, awesome. Then you're on a roller coaster of a ride. But that's just kind of the Division I mentality in a nutshell. But yeah, so my pick was that LeBady wanted me to be there, but he just couldn't financially help me, and Akron was the best institution for me to go to at the time because of where my grades were. And
yeah. Dude, you ended up all right.
Not too bad. Not too bad.
You're doing fine.
I'll be all right.
Well, we touched on some great topics today. We're going to sort of wrap up the episode a little bit. And so Jeremy, do we do a little bit of a quick sprint at the end here? Zach, I wanted to kind of start with you. What is one thing that you feel like you offer to anybody looking for coaching or looking for guidance with running? What's kind of a quick thing that you can just initially offer them?
Yeah. Openness, being open-minded. So understanding that you have a life, having other obligations in life, and how can we fit coaching into your world? Because at the end of it, depending on what you're doing, you can't alter a lot of what you do in your own life. So as a coach, being open-minded to be able to fit that into your life, I think that's the first and foremost, because if your coach understands the stressors that are in your life, then you can be able to give back to your coach what the coach is asking for you.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So for me, it's being a running consultant. I've used that sort of term earlier, and there's very few training methods and techniques and running techniques that I haven't seen and I haven't sort of come across. And so For me, it's just being that overarching 10,000 foot view and just sort of organizing and just being a general running consultant. So I love consulting with coaches on how to make modifications for their team, or whether it be individual athletes on like how to periodize their season, or how to close out, sort of land the plane when you're coming to the end of a training cycle. That's definitely a passion of mine, and I would consider that definitely one of my expertises. What would you say, Jeremy?
I would say a little along the lines of what Zach said. Definitely the openness, and then I didn't come from a running background, so I'm truly just a hard worker. I love hearing success stories that are hardworking, blue collar workers.
Yeah.
And I think I can pull that out of people maybe that don't have it.
Yeah.
But
I think you coming from the non-running background, and it matters.
And I think I can relate to people then. Because I truly have kids, I have all the things, and I like to, but at the end of the day, I truly like to get the best out of myself, and I think I can offer that to people and help them.
Yeah, I think you can too. So, so this was Dr. Leo Kormanek and Jeremy Pope, and he's kind of the marathon and more coaching aspect, and Zach Goulet, the massage therapist here at the clinic. And
That's right.
So again, we're going to have many more episodes come out. So be sure to keep posted and to subscribe to our page. We're going to touch on a lot of different topics. We'll even readdress kind of this coaching topic. So feel free to engage with us and let us know what you thought of the episode. And if you had any follow-up questions, we'll be sure to address it in a future episode. And so thanks for watching, and thanks for listening. And we enjoyed sort of having a chat for you guys.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Peace out.
See ya.